Morning students, the school raise Azizi. Today we are going to read and understand the rest of the paragraphs of the chapter Mother's Day. But before that, let's watch this video which is quite helpful and it tells you how to wash your hands.
Wet your hands with water. Apply soap. Rub your hands palm to palm and wash the backs of both hands and in between your fingers. Then palm to palm with fingers interlocked. Clasp your hands together and rub. And then clean around the thumbs too. Rub your fingertips in the palms of your hands and finish off with the wrists. Rinse your hands really well with water and dry them thoroughly with a paper towel. Use the towel to turn off the tap. Your hands are now clean.
Alright, coming back to the chapter Mother's Day. In previous video we learned about the characters and let me remind you who are they. Mrs. Annie Pearson is the lady we're talking about, mother, and George Pearson, his husband of Mrs. Annie Pearson. Doris Pearson, she's daughter of obviously Mr. and Mrs. Annie Pearson. And the third character here is Cyril Pearson, who is son. The fifth one is Mrs. Fitzgerald, who is a fortune teller, a lady, and the writer has described about the scene and the stage, how it should be. So scene was of the living room of the Pearson family, and it was afternoon. The living room was shown comfortably furnished, much lived in room. Okay, so these things were described in the first video. So now let's read the further paragraphs, which is on the page number 34. Mrs. Pearson, keep dropping a hint. She says this dubiously, in doubtful manner. Mrs. Fitzgerald, hint? It's more than hints your family needs, Mrs. Pearson. So, when Mrs. Fitzgerald tried to convince and explain that how Mrs. Pearson, other family members were enjoying and they were not caring about her, they were enjoying themselves, Mrs. Pearson, never went to enjoy in the night, but all the other members, husband, her son and daughter, used to go and enjoy. They were treating her like dirt. So this is what Mrs. Fitzgerald was trying to tell Mrs. Pearson. And on that, Mrs. Pearson said that, asked her to keep giving hint. Dropping means giving here. Drop, obviously, the word drop means like dropping water or something, but it's not like this here. It means giving. So Mrs. Fitzgerald said, hint? It is more than hints your family needs, Mrs. Pearson. Mrs. Pearson, dubiously again. I suppose it is. But I do hate any unpleasantness, and it's so hard to know where to start. So again, Mrs. Pearson became a shown doubtful manner, but she agreed. I suppose it is. So she agreed with Mrs. Fitzgerald, but she said that it was quite hard for her to think where to start from. I keep making up my mind to have it out with them, but somehow I don't know how to begin. And another thing, she mentioned that she hated unpleasantness, and it was hard for her to decide where to begin with. She glances at her watch or at a clock. Oh, good gracious. Glances. So basically, she looked at the watch and she gave expression. Good gracious is an expression of surprise. Look at the time, nothing ready, and they all be home any minute, and probably all in a hurry to go out again. So while she was talking with Mrs. Fitzgerald, she just looked at her watch or at a clock and gave an expression of surprise that, see, what was the time? And now they'll all be coming in any minute, and there's nothing ready for them. So just like in our houses, when especially your mother, maybe just like imagine that when you are out to the school and you are about to come, so if there's nothing ready at dinner, lunch, so that kind of expression Mrs. Pearson gave when she looked at the watch. As she is about to rise, Mrs. Fitzgerald reaches out across the table and pulls her down. So, looking at the watch, she realizes that it was too late. It was late. It was getting late, and she had to prepare something for the people, for the family members who were out, and they were supposed to come in any minute. She was just about to rise, but Mrs. Fitzgerald just pulls her down. Mrs. Fitzgerald, let me wait or look after themselves for once. This is where your foot goes down. Start now. So now this is the time. This is what she has been asking Mrs. Pearson to start with or to do something. So when Mrs. Pearson was about to go and prepare some food, anything for the boy, the girl, the son and daughter and husband, Mrs. Fitzgerald just stopped her of doing that, and she asked her to wait or sit down and just let them come. So basically, she wanted to see how they managed to look after themselves when they arrived. And she also said to Mrs. Pearson, this was the time to start, because in previous conversation she was worried as she didn't know where to start from. So this is what Mrs. Fitzgerald told Mrs. Pearson that this was the right time to start with. She lights a cigarette from the one she has just finished. So Mrs. Fitzgerald was already smoking, and she just lit another cigarette from the one which she has already finished. So this kind of activity is called chain smoking. So when you are smoking a lot, you finished one and then you started another one. So that's called chain smoking. So now you can also say that Mrs. Fitzgerald was a chain smoker. Mrs. Pearson, embarrassed. Mrs. Fitzgerald, I know you mean well. In fact, I agree with you, but I just can't, and it's no use you trying to make me. If I promise I'd really have it out with them. I know I wouldn't be able to keep my promise. When Mrs. Fitzgerald stopped Mrs. Pearson doing that, means like she wanted to go quickly and prepare something for them. On that, Mrs. Pearson said to Mrs. Fitzgerald, I know you mean well, means she knew that she didn't have any wrong intention, and she even agreed with her, means Mrs. Pearson's was agreed she agreed with Fitzgerald that she was doing right, but she didn't want to do it. She was saying that if she gave any promise to Mrs. Fitzgerald, she would not be able to keep that. Mrs. Fitzgerald, then let me do it. Mrs. Pearson, flustered. Oh no, thank you very much. So flustered means confused. So, oh no, thank you very much, Mrs. Fitzgerald. But that wouldn't do at all. It couldn't possibly be somebody else. They would resent it at once and wouldn't listen, and really I couldn't blame them. I know I ought to do it, but you see how it is. She looks apologetically across the table, smiling rather miserably. So when Mrs. Fitzgerald asked if she could do that work which Mrs. Pearson wanted to, on that, Mrs. Pearson became quite worried and said, oh no, thank you very much, Mrs. Fitzgerald, but that would not do at all. It could not be possibly be somebody else. They would resent. Resent means become angry. So Mrs. Pearson said to Miss Fitzgerald that because she was supposed to do these works, so she had to do. She wouldn't let, it could not be anybody else doing this, and they will become angry on that. They might become angry on that. And so looking at the table, Mrs. Pearson rather, smiling and saying that, but see how it is. So she was basically showing the situation that she had not been able to start anything and how it looked like. Mr. Fitzgerald, coolly, you haven't got the idea. Mrs. Pearson, bewildered. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you asked me to let you do it. So, Mr. Fitzgerald said again, oh, you haven't got the idea. Means, according to her, she meant something different. So, Mrs. Pearson, bewildered, surprised, stunned. So I'm sorry, I thought you were asking me to let you do that work. So on that, Mrs. Fitzgerald said, yes, I did, but not as me, as you, Mrs. Pearson. But I don't understand, you couldn't be me. So I'm going to stop here, but I would like to just give you a hint what they were going to do. In fact, she was going to do some kind of magic or something, so they could change their personalities. Means Mrs. Pearson would become Mrs. Fitzgerald, and Mrs. Fitzgerald would become Mrs. Pearson. So I'll discuss with you in the Zoom meeting later on today. And bye bye for now. And this chapter is quite long, so it's gonna be in 2-3 parts.